That whole nobody wants me, well, I want me now. I love sitting and feeling like a man among men. I didn't used to feel that way. So I carry that forward. I carry that into my marriage. I carry it in my still fathering young adult and adult children. I'm able to love better because I'm able to be free loving.
Welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hey, welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. I am your host for today, Joy Dunning, and I am here with Michael Byrd. Michael is one of our Crucible guys out in the Chicago area. Hey, Michael.
Hello, Joy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Hey, thanks for joining me. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Michael. I grew up here in Chicago. I am a superintendent at the Illinois Youth Center Chicago, one of the 5 youth prisons in the state of Illinois. I've been there 12 years, and it's really connected to that starts my Crucible connection. I've been married 33 years. That's been a wonderful journey, but it's been a journey. It's been work, as anyone who's married knows. I have 3 children, a 38-year-old daughter, 26-year-old, and 22-year-old, and both of them have come out as non-binary. So that's been a whole new aspect of work that I've had to do to figure out managing being the father of my 3 children. And then my oldest daughter has 5 children, so I'm a grandparent. So it's been good work working on me so that I can fit all of those roles that I find myself in.
Yeah. Sounds like all of those different elements are a whole episode on their own, right? Like talking about marriage, talking about parenting, talking about your role in the juvenile facility. Let's dive into some of your Crucible story. When did you do your initial weekend?
So I did my initial weekend May of 2014. I am a friend of Phil Jackson, a Crucible man that works in Chicago at the firehouse, and I had invited him to come speak because he works with teens in Mondale and hard to reach teens and difficult teens. I knew that about him, and I invited him to come speak to my young men at my facility. He was willing to come talk to them, but when he came, he also wanted to introduce something to me, and it turned out to be the Crucible Project. I had known Phil for years, but I hadn't heard of Crucible. And he invited me to look into it and wanted me to come. So this was December 2013. I was new at the facility, and one of the first calls I made was to Phil. He started inviting me to come to Crucible. It was really going to be good for me, he said. And so I told him, yeah, sure, okay. And just kind of, I meant it, but I wasn't invested in it. But he didn't let go. So I ended up at a Crucible retreat on that following May in 2014.
Did he ever tell you why he thought it would be good for you?
He just thought it would be a helpful thing for me to do because of my new role working at the facility, that it would make me a better man. He assumed that I had work that I could do on my soul. And he did make that assumption, but he made the right assumption.
Knowing soul work, I'd say that's a pretty safe assumption for pretty much anybody who's on this side of the ground.
Right. And so I said yes, and I eventually committed to it and went to my first weekend that May.
Going into the weekend, what did you want for yourself? What was motivating you to step into it?
I don't think I really clearly understood what I wanted. I reflected on it. I did think through issues I knew I had, but I didn't understand what working on those issues would really mean. So I went into it kind of blindly. In a way, I'll even call it ignorantly. I didn't even go to the website and look at what Crucible really was going to offer or the challenge. I didn't do any of that prior to my initial weekend.
So you just trusted Phil and showed up.
And showed up and knew no one else there but Phil.
Wow. That's a lot of trust. I'm grateful that you came.
And I am too now.
Going through the weekend, were you able to identify a want as the weekend unfolded?
Well, it became pretty easy too, because the weekend is filled with thought provoking exercises and sessions. You dive in deep right away. That impressed me. I have a background in psychology and I've worked in social services all my career. I knew baggage issues that I had, but layers started to peel back as the weekend went on. And so I did start to see pretty quickly that there were things that I needed to address and look at.
Do you remember what any of those wants were?
Yeah. So I'm adopted within my own family, and there were these messages. And I walked into the weekend knowing that I was carrying this sense of I don't fit in and I don't belong because nobody cares for me. There's a message that I've been dealing with over all the years of doing soul work. My adopted parents, my uncle and aunt that adopted me and became my mother and father, used to tell me, we adopted you because we love you and nobody wanted you, so we loved you and we adopted you. We took you in. In all of that message, the thing I hung my hat on was nobody wanted you. I know they intended to be saying the love part and we took you, and I heard that part too, but I got stuck on and still hear a message from time to time about nobody wanted you. That had broken me. I carried that from early childhood. I had been hearing that message since old enough to understand that I was adopted because I was always told. It was never a secret. I was always told, oh, you're adopted and nobody wanted you, so we loved you, so we took you. So that nobody wanted me message, man, that messed with me. That had me hiding from it and trying to make up for it and angry about it and hurt about it. I carried a lot of stuff about that.
Yeah. I have an adopted daughter, and thinking about what messaging we're trying to tell her about her story, she's only 3. Those words would sting. Those are heavy words. As the weekend unfolded, you had this message that was hanging on to you. What were you able to do with it? What did the weekend give you around that message or others that came up for you?
The weekend really helped me unravel how connected that message had become to how I navigated my worlds, how I saw myself and my self esteem. It impacts my relationship with my wife and had been impacting it because I have discovered I got married to have someone finally be the person who unconditionally is going to love me. In my growing up, that message of nobody wanted me means I don't have that unconditional love that I have now learned folks who are not adopted don't always have. But in my view as a child, other people have their mother, their father that unconditionally loves them. And the reason I didn't have an unconditional loving parent is because I was adopted and nobody wanted me. So it's helped me unravel that and see how that had affected my relationship with my wife, affected my relationship as a parent to my children. My wife and I have gone through some difficult times over the 33 years, and there have been times where I've thought, ugh, I want to get out of this. I don't want this. But I've stayed, well, because I love my wife, but I've also stayed because I didn't ever want to be the visiting parent to my children. So that message also affected my choices around how I wanted to parent.
One of the things that really strikes me about every Crucible weekend I've been on is the ways those messages that we take on as kids, whether it's spoken, like in your case, or unspoken, like in my case, things that I read between the lines, how they carry on into adulthood and impact the way that we carry ourselves in our marriages. And, how many people get married looking for exactly what you are looking for, or have kids hoping now I'll finally have somebody who loves me because I made them. They have to. It's such a gift to have a place where you can start to dig into some of those messages and look at the way that those roots creep into these other things and decide how you want to move forward, knowing what you now know about the impact of those messages, and make a different choice in those relationships to have like healthier decisions.
Absolutely. And look at all of the unhealthy decisions I made and why I made them because Like in college years, to be very transparent here, I made some pretty unhealthy choices in drug use and alcohol use, how I saw myself as a man, because I didn't see myself as a man. I was a failure as a young man growing up. And so all of that was really heavy and led to depression in my life, unresolved anger. And so throughout that initial weekend, a lot of those layers started to become visible to me. What I really enjoyed was getting language for it. The weekend gave me language that helped me understand about hiding, repressing, and denying things, and language for that part of me that I don't want anyone to know. A real freedom that came was in seeing the men who were leading the weekend be so transparent
Hmm.
and be so honest. And I so wanted that. I
Yeah.
want to live in a world where men are honest and giving of their truths. I shared with you that I was adopted within my family. I didn't share the why. So my birth mother died. I'm born as a result of my mother's affair with my father, who was married. For a time, apparently, he did take me as an infant after my mother was ill and was dying. He took me to live with his family. He had a wife and other children. It didn't work out, and I was removed from there. The story I'm told, I was abused and not treated well there. And so my uncle and aunt, I was brought to them by my grandfather. Apparently, they were told to take care of me and raise me. But I have this father out here in the world who apparently I grew up knowing, but didn't know he was my father.
Wow.
Yeah, I knew him all my life. He's now deceased, but I knew him all my childhood because he would be around. He would be at family things. One of my other aunts passed away, and at the funeral, my father was there. We have a family picnic and get together. My father would be there, and he was always nice and friendly with me.
Hmm.
And only after my adopted father passed away when I was 13, after he died, my birth father came and introduced himself as who he really was.
Wow.
Yeah, there's all of that, right? So, and that could be a whole nother podcast. But the point is, all those layers of where do I fit in? Who cares about me? And all those angers, trying to figure out how to numb all of this stuff that I had carried. And so I got myself to college and decided, oh, wow, there's more fun to be had escaping this heaviness. Alcohol became my escape to a detriment. Functioned well enough to do school and get decent grades. It didn't do that to me, but it did do a job on my self-esteem and who I really should have been, because I wasn't really being who I was capable of being. And so Crucible, my initial weekend, helped me peel those things back, and seeing men speak their truths and be transparent. That just blew my mind because I felt like I had lived a life filled with men, my father, not being transparent, not being honest. I had
Right.
lived my entire childhood knowing my father and not knowing he was my father. To this day, have such an issue with lies,
Hmm.
triggered by lies and dishonesty and hidden secrets. And so the fact that men were so honest and telling their truths and telling deep truths. It's funny. Crucible, there are men I have now known for 10, 12, 13 years. I know the deep secrets of their lives, but what are their children's names? What do you do for a living again?
Mm-hmm.
We don't do those casual conversations. We go right in. And so I know the deep things of men's lives. And I love that because they know mine, and I feel safe. I feel safe being able to talk to a man about these deeper things of my life because he'll talk to me about the deep things of his life.
Yeah. Beauty of soul work is it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your current status is. Are you willing to show up, and are you willing to be vulnerable and honest and transparent? If so, there's a place for you here.
I love that. And I need that. I need that safety feeling. I've got some other traumas that happened, some sexual abuse traumas that happened in my history. So being safe around men has now become a big value.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to get into what life has been like for you since your initial retreat, because I know that you've actually done a lot of really cool things with Crucible. But before we get there, I want to circle back, if you're willing. You mentioned that your two younger kids came out as non-binary. In the world of Crucible, we talk about all of you is welcome here, and it sounds like you did a lot of work around where you fit in the world. And so I'm curious if you could share with us, I heard you say like you've had to do some work around what that looks like for you. So can you tell us a bit about that journey?
Sure. So I think it's really been helpful for me to look at and own how is that about me? Like in terms of my reaction to my children's identities and their expression of who they are, and then my issue or my discomfort or oh, how do I deal with that? Looking at how is that about me has been so helpful, and that is a Crucible founding work, right?
Hmm.
I have judgments, but how do those judgments fit in my world that I'm having these judgments, not about what you did or who you are, but how's that about me? That's really been a helpful place for me to meet my children, not just with love, because that part was easy. I didn't have I'm going to turn off love. I can't love you anymore because you're not fitting my mold, right? You're not
Hmm.
fitting what I thought you should be. In my heart, I love my children no matter who they are. But in my head, it was, wait, this doesn't fit the American traditional how the family should be. It was work for me and is work for me to keep looking at how is that about me and what are my issues around my own identity and struggle and how what's gone on in my experience of my development affected how I see other people, and specifically my the youngest just graduated college last month in May, so they are old enough to live their lives and make adult choices for themselves. My work has to do with how I'm viewing them, filtered through how I view myself as a parent, myself as an African American man, the stigma in the Black culture around LGBTQ. I had to go back to how is that about me and my
Hmm.
own embarrassment or sense of, oh, I failed or something that initially was roaming around my head because my children are now not the American standard.
Hmm. That makes sense. It's always amazing to me how God allows the parts of our story that are so messy to be full circle moments, especially going back to the messaging that you had as a kid of nobody wants you. I mean, it sounds like you really had a choice with your adult children deciding, do I want you? Am I going to continue to pursue a relationship with you? Or am I going to say, you're not matching what I expected of you, and so nobody wants you? The work that you have done and continue to do, God is using it in a way that takes on a whole new iteration for a whole new generation.
I agree. Yes, I think that's very true. And
Hmm.
I love that that's true for me.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of what the last 12 years has looked like for you since your initial weekend, especially in relation to Crucible and your job. I'm going to give you the floor and let you tell us a bit about that.
That's easy. So I've gone through my initial weekend, and then their second level weekends exist, and sexuality and leadership, mission. And I went through all of those weekends. They really helped and aided my continued work. I work in a juvenile justice system with young men, mostly African American, some Latinx, every now and then a few white, that are trauma impacted, wounded, and angry, lost, and
Hmm.
confused. I'm a grown man, 18, 19-year-old. They'll argue because when we set limits on them or consequence them for their behavior, you can't treat me like that. I'm a man. 18, 19-year-old young man, sure. 12-year-old dispositions, temper tantrums, kind of stuck in their childhood because they haven't really grown up healthy or ripe. And I just knew that once I got a hold of Crucible and how it helped me, if I could get every one of these young men through Crucible, they could use this. This would be so helpful to them. A good friend of mine in the Crucible Urban community, Terrence Foster, and I talked about that, and we developed a co-leadership project that we started to call Crucible on the Inside. We thought we could adapt a Crucible weekend and do one inside the prison. And because I had some control over the facility that I work in, I was the assistant superintendent over programming. We developed a program for a weekend. It had to have quite a bit of adaptation for one, adolescent young men and not adult men, um, and adaptation to some of the things that are the processes in a Crucible weekend that wouldn't be appropriate inside of the facility. So we adopted some things, got a team together of men. Either they worked in some form of teen ministry or teen work or prison work. And we put that together and we did the first Crucible on the Inside weekend maybe 6 years ago, just before COVID. It was an experiment the first time, and there were things that we didn't anticipate, but it was dynamic and it had an effect on the young men.
That's really cool. Have you only done it then at the juvenile facility, or have you done it at other locations as well?
We have done it at Stateville Adult Prison. We did one there, and it went really well there,
Mm,
though difficult because some of the men refused to do some of the exercises. It was uncomfortable and challenging to them, and they're all locked in a facility and have to go back to the facility like on a Crucible weekend. I didn't know any of those men that I went with. I became acquainted and have now, at this point, got what I believe will be lifelong relationships with some of these men. But I also didn't have to then go back and live day to day with those men. And so some of the men inside Stateville got really uncomfortable in sharing and processing through things that they would now have to go back and either be accountable for or have to deal with the having been transparent in a prison, which makes you vulnerable, right? So we had to
yeah.
think about those kinds of things. But it was successful. So we've done it there and are working on doing it soon at another juvenile facility. St. Charles has a facility that's one of the state facilities for young men in St. Charles, Illinois. And we've been talking with them. They've agreed to do it. That's on the horizon.
You know, one of the things that we say on specifically on our initial weekend, but even other weekends, is that it's a place where there are no real world consequences. So it's a safe place for you to be able to explore these messages and things that have been sticking with you. So it makes sense, right, that doing this inside of Stateville Prison, which if you're not familiar with the area, Stateville is a maximum security prison out in Illinois. And I can imagine that there are some real world consequences to sharing. So the fact that actually you were able to get any of them to be willing to be vulnerable and open up and share some of the things that they were carrying with them, I think is just such a huge testament to not only the work of Crucible, but the way that you and Terrence set up the program to create safety. That's huge.
It was a lot of work. We did a lot of work with the men that became the staff, working with them and orienting them to management inside of a facility, inside of a prison, but also in dealing with incarcerated men. There was a lot of pre-work and even in real time, pulling a couple of men aside who had lots of experience doing Crucible weekends, but this was their first Crucible on the Inside. Not to knock a guy, but there was a guy who he got stuck on this is how this process has to go because that's the protocol. And we found ourselves on the fly adjusting it because of the circumstance that we saw developing among the incarcerated men and had let go of the protocol. It's not going to work this way. We have to do it differently. And we did, and we managed it. And he then managed, but initially he got really stuck on that's not how it goes. Well, that's not how it goes on an initial weekend out in wherever we're doing them. And I think it worked. The men at the end of the weekend, because we came and went, we didn't stay overnight. And we came Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And at the end, the closing circle with all the men, they were touched. There were some tears. If you use tears as a marker that, men are showing their emotions, but there were also praise reports, a desire for us to come back. Now, I will admit that we have failed those men. They wanted us to come back and not be a one-time hit and gone. And so far, that would be the reality. I want to not make that the reality because we made a commitment. But it's a lot of work and getting a team together. And we were trying to get a team together to go out and do groups follow up so that we could work with those men who did the weekend that they could then staff the next weekend. Some of those men are still there. So I think I have a vision that we will still get back there. That's a goal.
The work that you're doing with the Crucible on the Inside community is huge. And even if it takes a while to get back to it, I still believe that there are big things that God has done through the work that has already taken place. So, man, bless you and bless Terrence. Speaking of you and Terrence, Crucible on the Inside is not the only community within Crucible that you have been committed to being a part of. We also have the Crucible Urban community that you guys are heavily involved with. Can you tell us more about what that community looks like and what it is?
Yeah, so the Crucible Urban community serves as a catalyst to draw in men who have an urban Chicago experience growing up, living, working. And so that can be men of color, it can be white men, the men who have grown up and have had an inner city urban experience of life. And there's a difference if lived in the suburbs all your life. That's a different world than living in the inner city. The inner city that's impacted by different levels of poverty, whether it's financial poverty, but not everyone living in the inner city is financially impoverished. But there is a difference in living in the inner city, especially in certain cultures, Black culture, Latinx culture, because the experience of who you are and who you become is impacted by that culture that you're in. And having now served as a staff man on both urban weekends, every urban weekend that has happened since I did my initial, I have now staffed. But I've been involved since 2014. I've now staffed urban weekends, but I've also staffed the TCP weekends here in Chicagoland, Wisconsin, outside of Chicagoland. I've staffed a few times, and there is a difference in the experience of the men. The wounds can still be the same, father issues, some sense of belonging, fitting in, those kinds of identified soul issues, but the roots of them can be different. And it's more comforting to be in a room where the other men have similar experience because they also grew up in an urban environment, whether Black, white, or Hispanic. There's just a cultural difference of living in a neighborhood where there's poverty and you don't see fathers getting up and getting into their BMWs with their briefcases and certain tie going off to work. But instead, you walk down a street where there is a vacant lot filled with broken bottles and glass, and maybe you see someone's father that you grew up knowing that's my friend's father. Oh, he's drunk again on the corner, right? And it's just a different cultural experience. So I have now been a member of, and I'm part of the leadership team for the Urban TCP.
Yeah, it makes sense to create a space where people who have had that experience can come together and there's more of this general understanding of, I get what you're talking about. I know what you're describing. Yeah, I've been there too. That makes a lot of sense. What do the specifics of the urban community look like? How many guys do you have involved? I know it's all over Chicago, but are there specific neighborhoods that you're more involved with? What's the general look?
We get a lot of men that attend the urban weekends that come out of Lawndale community, but that's because there's a strong body of urban leaders that work in Lawndale. Phil Jackson, we've already talked about, who directs the Firehouse Community Art Facility in Lawndale. Terrence Foster is now becoming a minister in a church in Lawndale. But I think it's really Chicago wide when we get men that attend the urban weekends. They're coming from Chicago South Side, West Side, North Side, all over. We've created a leadership team. Tony Bradburn and Terrence Foster have become the first certified Crucible leaders who are African American, who are Black. There had not been any Crucible weekend leaders of color until they became the first two. And that's a point of pride that we have Black leaders. I'm now on that leadership track myself. I'm
Hmm.
going apprentice lead weekend in October in Virginia.
So on our website, we have a list of all of the weekends. Occasionally, we will get men reaching out saying, hey, what is this weekend marked urban and can I come? So what would you say to a guy who's wondering about if the urban weekend would be a good fit for him?
A Crucible weekend is good fit for any man who wants to look into his soul and do work on becoming a better man and creating that world where we are safe with each other, we can support each other, we can build each other, we can hold each other accountable. And so any weekend will do that. An urban weekend is only distinctly urban because it's open for men who identify as having come from that background, and that's a self identification gives that space for that man, but the work is any man's work. And so any man can come and attend. I'm going to put a plug in that I find that men who have come and were like, whoa, I didn't know exactly what that meant to come urban, but this was just the next one that was happening. So I decided to go, have come and had a great experience because I find that with the urban weekends, how do I say this? Right? Men of color, Black men, Hispanic men, Latinx men, there's a fire in the belly. There's a passion in the work. There's something of different energy and creates an atmosphere that's a little different than the other weekends. I've done weekends both, and I've also done weekends in Africa, and that has a distinctly different flavor. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There was one point in one of the African weekends, a whole celebration with drums and it sounds maybe stereotypical, but with drums and chanting broke out.
Not
And
planned. It just
it
happens.
just happened. Many urban weekends, I've seen the men break into prayer.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that doesn't happen on other weekends, but it has a culture within a culture.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I am just so appreciative of the time that you have spent, not just talking to me tonight, but the time that you have invested in Crucible, whether it's Crucible on the inside or the urban community, now the leader track, going out and becoming another certified retreat leader. And so as we wrap up, I'm curious if there's anything that you want to share with us about what you have gotten for yourself over the last 12 years of doing this work, or maybe what hopes you have for the future, anything that you want to share with us.
I have gotten a really great foundation in owning who I am. That whole nobody wants me. Well, I want me now because there was a time when I didn't want me. I didn't want my little boy that I was. I hated him. He was so fragile and picked on and felt so lonely. Didn't like him. I've grown to love him. There's still
Hmm.
things I don't like about him, but I've grown to love him and love myself. I'm a stronger man internally. Externally, I was an assistant prison warden already, but it's given me something in my foundation, in my soul. I feel like I stand taller. I say this almost every retreat I staff. I love sitting and feeling like a man among men because I
Hmm.
didn't used to feel that way. I acted like I was a man among men if I was in a meeting or I've worked in social services all my career and I've had some management roles and I can do all of that in my head and in my presentation, but the little scared boy inside of me, was always still huddled in a corner, scared. And now he's not so fragile. He's not as scared. He has power and it feels amazing. I carry that now in all these other roles that I'm in. I carry that into my marriage. I carry that into taking on this role as superintendent. I carry it in my still fathering young adult and adult children. I'm bolder, more loving because I'm able to love better because I'm able to be free loving. I was protecting myself and withholding love in some ways. And now I don't need to do that. It comes out sometimes and I discover it, but I have a network of men. I do work ongoing. I have a network of brothers that we check in weekly, our emotions and what's going on and talk about the different issues. And it's really helped me. And that's been an ongoing work. I've done Crucible small groups for some seasons. I've done Crucible check-in calls on the leadership team. We have a monthly meeting. We do some check-ins before the meeting starts, but all of that's become a part of, wow, I feel freer and I feel stronger and I feel more comfortable facing and looking at the parts of me that still need work.
Yeah. Well, Michael, it is clear just from this short time that we've had together that you are a man of power and a man of wisdom. I'm just so grateful for your willingness to hang out with me for a little bit here. You mentioned the check-ins that we have for an hour once a week. We do have a Better Man check-in. So if you want to become a better man, join these guys from 12 to 1 p.m. Central Time every Thursday. And there's information about that on our website. If you go to thecrucibleproject.org, you'll get some more info on that. Thank you so much for your time and bless you as you go forward in this leadership track and in all of your different endeavors. Grateful for your influence.
It's been wonderful having this conversation with you. I'm glad to share it. Thank you for this time, too.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening. And don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.